love, welcome to Queerify, formerly known as Quest, a journey to wellness. Here, we help demystify wellness for cutie BIPOC. And I'm V, aka Love Nest Monster. I'm a two-spirit human, joy influencer, and all pronouns accepted. And today's guests are breaking the taboos around death with their company called Floripondio. And both of their names is May-lissa, they, them, and Batul True Heart, they, them, aapo. And if you're wondering what aapo is, it's another type of pronoun, but you're going to have to continue listening because Batul is going to break it down much more beautifully. In terms of what Floripondio is, it's their business they've started that offers decolonial and ceremonial end of life care for cutie BIPOC and allies. What they've started, it's incredible. I've literally have never heard of anything like it before, why we brought this here for y'all, because people need to hear about this and need to learn. There's this quote from them that it captivated me and I wanted to share it, where they said, "We are death positive. We see and celebrate death as a natural part of life and seek to eradicate the silence around death-related topics." And that hit so hard because I'm sure me just saying the word death, some of y'all are getting that little deep feeling in your throat. But I will say that feeling will get eased with the rest of this episode, where we break down a lot of topics, where we go from telling y'all what two-spirit even means, because some of y'all are over here like, I don't even know what that means. So we're going to break that down, and, we're just going to talk about how to just be comfortable with feeling your feels and really get in there, and how to transmute your pain into a really beautiful healing for you and those around you, and all the personal and global mess that we face, like how you can continuously discover your true self. They even share some magical rituals on how to handle your grief and trauma. But before you get into this episode, I need to warn everyone that there is some talk about suicide. So if that is a big no-no, please do not continue listening to the episode. So I just want to make sure you had that warning. So without further ado, here is May-lissa and Batul with Floripondio.
My name is Batul True Heart, and my pronouns are they, them, and aapo. And aapo means he, she, and they in our Hiaknoki, in our Yaqui language. I'm Yaqui identified. I'm also Chicane identified, which means I'm Mexican American with an Indigenous perspective on life. I'm also Panamanian American. My grandmother's first generation born from here, from Panama. And I do want to say too that I do say American, just because, not out of pride, but out of just facing reality. And a fun fact about me is that my favorite food is butter.
Yeah.
Bread's good and all, tortillas are good and all, but they're much better with butter. As far as
that is so true. Yeah, that brings me back to my childhood when my dad would warm up the tortilla on the stove and then just put butter on it, roll it up, and here's a snack.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So another fun fact, thank you, is that I was voted best waitress in my hometown, People's Choice Awards, like in the paper. I love being a healer and everything, but I actually feel like my healing started as a waitress and like serving people and supporting people that way and connecting with people. I actually I do take pride in that one.
I love that. And I can relate. But before I jump into how I can relate, I would love to hear a little bit from May-lissa and introduce you to the crowd.
Yes, thank you. Miari da'irime May-lissa. Hello, my name is May-lissa. My pronouns are they, them, or naya hanai, which is they, them in Hiwatahia Taino. I identify as two-spirit, queer, and my people predominantly come from Puerto Rico, Borinquen, Puerto Rico. So I'm a mixed Afro-Taino, Black, Indigenous, and also European, both through my Puerto Rican ancestors, but then also I have one grandmother, my grandma Sophie, who was from Poland. And a fun fact about me is that I play bomba, which is Afro-Puerto Rican music and dance, and it's a beautiful music of resistance, and that developed on sugarcane plantations in the archipelago during the transatlantic slave trade. And yeah, it's a beautiful practice. So I'm going to share that.
Awesome. I just got some drums and I have no idea how to use them. I go out into nature alone, hoping no one's around, and just bang on them and do whatever feels good. So, got to check your bomba out.
Love it.
Yeah, and then back to Batul about the restaurant situation. I've been a bartender for 10 plus years, and I've been so drawn to healing. And someone brought to my attention that like I am a healer in that space, because there's a lot of like people that's like, what do you want? Okay, here you go, bye. But I take my service a little bit further and I get to know the people, and I feel like I might Reiki into my beverages. I don't know. So
I love that. Yes, I'm an old restaurant person, and I used to run restaurants. And you're reminding me too of one of our mentors, Estela Roman, who I'm sure we'll talk about many times today. But she's a curandera, but she has this dream that I can say I probably have a little bit of this dream too, of someday opening a bar as a curandera and giving people drinks, but then the next day charging them for limpias.
yeah.
Whole business plan, actually.
It's a whole really flowing business model.
Yeah, definitely. It'll always keep feeding itself.
Exactly.
And for some of those listeners, can you explain what a curandera is?
Yeah. Let's see. Well, curandera is typically a healer. Typically, traditionally, in every pueblo and every town and every community, there are healers. Yeah, in Mexico, that's what the healers of the community are called, curanderas. The women, curanderos, the men, and then the gender-inclusive way of saying it would be curandere. I'll also share, too, that May-lissa and I are on the path of Curanderismo, which is actually a more modern word, but it really means the path of healing. And it was first coined, Alicio Torres, I think is his name, by a Mexican-American man here in the States, to be more of like originally like a Mexican healer word. But since then, it's really expanded to just the diaspora of Latinx diaspora, I would say.
That's amazing. I feel like y'all are already healers. Me and my partner, we buy your Florida water wherever we can find it when we do our workings. I thought I'd share a little bit of how much you already are healing. And even that, like, I am also Yaqui and Hopi, so I had no idea there was one word for all the pronouns. So, you know, you just arriving are teaching and healing more than I think y'all know. And I thought I'd share that. May-lissa, you mentioned Two-Spirit. And I've mentioned it here on this podcast a few times, but we might have some new listeners that haven't heard what it is. What is Two-Spirit for you?
Yeah. So for me, it means, I think it's a couple things that feel important to me. Is one, it's honoring and acknowledging the presence of people who navigate gender in more fluid and creative ways. It acknowledges the fact that the whole idea of the gender binary is a colonial construct that was imposed on many of us, continues to be imposed on many of us. And so understanding and recognizing that there is masculine energy in the world, all around us, in nature and in our bodies, and the idea of our ability to, that we can all relate to that, express that, experience that in different ways, is more to me, a more indigenous way of being in relationship to even this idea of quote unquote gender. And so to me, the idea of saying that I'm claiming that I am two spirit, like claiming that identity, means one, that I'm acknowledging that I don't believe in the gender binary. I don't believe in the colonial constructs of gender and the ways that that limits us and the ways that that separates us from the natural world. And it means to me also that I navigate those spaces in between, like those both and spaces.
I love that. Same question for you, Batul, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. Two spirit for me means that I carry both masculine and feminine energies, which is actually kind of a funny thing to say because I believe we all do, whether we're two spirit or not. But like the thing that I think also really distinguishes true spirit is that it's our queerness weaved into our indigeneity. And it's actually a role. Traditionally, although the word two spirit is a more modern term, right? Because every tribe has their own language, and specifically for like 3, 4, 5 or more genders sometimes. So we know that we've always existed, right? But this is really, I think, the foundation, one of the foundations of our work of Floripondio is that as QT BIPOC, this is actually who we are. Like, this is our death workers, medicine people. That's traditionally who two spirits are in tribal communities. We are the ones who are there in times of transition. Often we work with spirit, like we work with the tangible and the ethereal. We work often with prayer and plants. Yeah, this is, I think a lot of our work is actually supporting QT BIPOC people to actually be in our role and know our role and actually know that this is who we are.
I love that so much. Actually, just the past couple of years, I've been identifying as two spirit once I learned what it was, because I grew up very detached from my native side. My father, he's Native and Mexican, so his mom was Yaqui and his dad is Hopi. And then my mother was born in the Philippines, so I'm first generation on that half. So it was a lot of like different culture, also trying to assimilate to the American quote unquote way. So it was really beautiful to find out what two spirit was. And for me, I was like, oh, cool. I don't have to choose. I could just exist. I like this. Because I think it was just the pressures of you're a girl. And then me being like, no, I don't want to do all that. And then presenting masculinely. And then people being like, yo, like you're too feminine. Like that's weird. So I hated like having to put myself in a box. And when I found out like, I don't have to do that. Two spirit, I hung on to it. And I was like, this is where I can exist fully. And this is beautiful.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
The other word too that comes to mind, that's another word that I love, is indigiqueer. That also I think really represents us.
Absolutely. I love that so much. And I was curious too. I know you had mentioned Floripondio and the work that y'all do. How did y'all get into, or maybe let's start first of explaining what Floripondio is, and then I'll dive to the next question.
I can start us off, and then maybe Batul can pick up us then with like kind of the history of how we got to this project that is Floripondio, this prayer that is Floripondio. Floripondio is we provide end-of-life care and education for QT BIPOC and all dying allies and or dying comrades. And what that means, so being death workers, we identify as death workers, we identify as grief workers. Some people use the language doula, which is got popularized in birth work in the last couple decades. And some people use that word in death work also, so might call themselves death doulas. We do sometimes use that word because people know what it means-ish. And also we prefer to use the language death companions or death workers because the word doula actually literally means female servant or slave. So it's both gendered and problematic in many ways. So we use the language death companions most often. For us, what that means is, and there's lots of different ways to be death doulas or death companions. There's lots of different ways that people have done that historically. Part of what we believe, kind of like what Batul was saying, and thinking about us as Two-Spirit folks, that we have traditionally, historically, always played these roles in our communities, is the idea that traditionally, historically, when our communities, when our lineages, when our cultures were more intact, there were always people that accompanied in these major transitions in life. There were people who accompanied us in birth. There were people who accompanied us in death. Nowadays, for so many of us, because our cultures and lineages are not intact in the same way, we have these roles that have become defined, and we have these names that probably in the past people didn't say, oh, that's the death companion. Now we use that language. We are reclaiming that role, right? That right that we have to be cared for in that way. For us, because of who we are, what that looks like is we talk about our work being decolonial. We talk about our work being ceremonial. So I would say the heart of what Floripondio does is we bring ceremony and spirit and ritual back into these life transitions. For so many people in this world, navigating death and dying is a very medicalized experience, and it's a very legal, institutional, material experience. And what so many of us have lost, unfortunately, or forgotten, is how to hold and be with the ceremony and spirit of what's happening in these times. So we do offer practical support. We can guide people in doing end-of-life planning, putting together your advanced directives so your loved ones know what your wishes are when you're at your end of life. Also, we do a lot of ceremony work. So that can be ceremonializing the idea of end-of-life planning. Like, how do we maybe create an altar? How do we bring in prayer and connect with spirit and connect with our hearts to get to what our truth is, and with the truth of what we feel like we need or want in this time in our lives, right? All that can be ceremonialized or ritualized. And then also we do a lot of space holding for people to process and integrate whether they themselves are sick and or dying, although we believe we're all dying. As soon as we're born, we're dying, but more actively dying. A lot of people that come to us, though, to be honest, are people who are supporting loved ones who are dying or have died. We've started this project almost coming up on 3 years ago now, and what has happened over the course of these last couple of years is that our work has also really presented itself to us. We kind of went in knowing our vision, what felt like the prayer, what felt like was in our hearts. And then also, as the last couple of years have gone on and we've been officially launched this project, we're being guided to where we need to be, and we're being shown what our work is. And so that has so far tended to be really working with people who are navigating a loved one who's dying and or who has recently died. And yeah, we support them in processing, integrating that experience. We support folks through offering limpias or cleansing, like spiritual cleansings, space clearings. We support people in just really being present with what's happening and navigating the material reality of that, also being able to be present with and navigating like the emotional, spiritual, energetic reality of what is.
I don't know if you would like to add anything to that, Batul.
I don't know. There's not too much more to add. I think the only other thing that's coming to mind that I think is unique to our work is that we support people in also viewing emotions from a nature-based and Indigenous perspective. That's also something that we've been taught along the way through our elders and mentors, specifically our mentor, who's a curandera from Mexico, Estela Roman. We've both been working with her for almost 10 years. One of the biggest teachings that she's offered us and so many people is this teaching around Los 13 Aires, or the 13 winds, which is a whole, deep teaching. The basis is, about the 13 most difficult emotions. And the basis of that teaching is that our emotions are part of nature, and they're here for a reason. And they're like the wind, just like emotions are like the wind. They're meant to move. And we really relate to our emotions as messengers and teachers and guides. And so for me, that's the last 10 years, it's the foundation of my practice. It's my belief system. And then now for so many years, we've been also, teaching about the Aires, and it's definitely a big part of our work as well.
Oh, I love this so much because I think about when I was a kid, I had church, and church was supposed to make me feel good, but church was making me feel worse. And you're stuck in this building, in this little room with all these people with all their emotions and all their things, and you got basically like a big tornado of emotions in this confined space. So hearing that you also incorporate nature in some way, and the way that also May-lissa was saying that the medical process is just so dry, it made me think of almost sterile. It's so sterile that there's nothing to hang on to. And for me personally, doing my own ancestral work, and when I gave up the church, I had basically kind of like a mother figure. She was my grandma who passed away. Instead of praying to God, I started praying to her, and I started feeling better. And it was just incredible. And so to hear that y'all are bringing this in while people are in that medical process, while they're dying and they're about to pass, you're taking that sterilized, scary feeling away and giving them something to hold on to. And I think that it's really special and warms my heart, and I'm excited to jump into this and learn more about it. And I'm curious, mainly how did y'all even get into this?
When I think of, or folks ask me how did I get here? The first thing I think of is I'm here because of my pain, my own pain. That's what got me here. I didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a healer. I've been on this track really since I was a kid, out of survival, really trying to, my one prayer and wish as a young person was just to feel good inside, just to feel some sense of peace or happiness. I was born into domestic violence, my household, from the get since I was in the womb. And that was really just a lot of my childhood, a lot of survival. I come from housing instability since I was born. It's so interesting because I feel like my ancestors have been, and I know that May-lissa and I have this in common, that our ancestors have been talking to us and guiding us since we were children, since before we knew, of course, that they were doing that. And so this path for me has been lifelong, trying to understand where all this pain came from. Because yes, a lot of it came from my own life and my own childhood. But it's also been clear to me, even as a kid, that generationally I come from pain, right? The people who raised me were traumatized. I come from traumatized people. I feel like I've always known I was going to be a death worker. I also come from a Christian background. I'm still healing from that Christian background, I would say. As a child, I was always thinking too of death. I was terrified of death. Most of my life, honestly, as a child into my 20s, I thought about death all the time. And I was always afraid of my mom dying. And then as I got older into my teens, I come from a rural, like poor town, and so many people died by suicide as I was growing up. I could probably name 10 of my friends who died by suicide or drug overdose. I think for me, I've been trying to understand pain and what happened since I was a kid. I've been trying to understand, like, what is going on here? How come all these adults are so unregulated, right? So emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of time that emotion being anger and rage. For me, like, this truly has been my whole life, this quest. I always wanted to get a higher education, but I didn't, because this has been the focus of my education is like this education of life, and this, university of life, as one of our elders says. And just trying to, like, discover who I truly am, right? In all of this, like, in this mess, in this mess of this world, but also, like, in this internal mess too, of being mixed people, of being disconnected from so much. I too grew up disconnected from my indigeneity. And so, yes, there's so much to say, but yeah, I would say that it's my pain that got me here. And I think it's a good quality to have as a death worker, folks who've been through things and folks who know how to hold space for the hardest things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like you have a different compassion and a different way to approach, because you're understanding. You're like, yeah, I know what that feels like.
Yeah, we're not just trauma informed, we're trauma experienced.
Yeah. Exactly. May-lissa, would you like to answer this question too, of how or what brought you into starting this work as well?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that question. I mean, similarly to some of what Batul shared, though we've had different circumstances in our lives, we have a lot of similarities in terms of themes. And I think that's also what brought us together and connected us as friends, and then as people on a healing path, on our own healing paths, and then now in this work that we do together, which has evolved also over the years. For me, I do feel like really my own healing journey, and my own, particularly for me, how it feels is my own relationship to grief really brought me here. I feel like I have been grieving for most of my life. I feel like, and a lot of that is rooted in also my experiences of childhood, also growing up in a very violent home, being a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, that, like, being abandoned by my family for speaking out. Like, there's a lot that has shaped my experience, my identity, my life in this world. And my navigating that with a fierce commitment to be like, there has to be something on the other side of this is, like, kept me going, right? Some days more than others. Also, similarly, I grew up in a very assimilated home. Also, there was a lot of shame about who my people are, where we came from. A lot of internalized, you name it, internalized racism, internalized misogyny, internalized homophobia, internalized ableism, like all of that. So that just all played out every day in my home, in my family, in my upbringing. And I experienced a lot of grief because I feel like my little spirit came into this world and was like, what? Like, and that has really shaped me. That first and foremost brought me to my own healing path. Also, literally out of survival. Like, something has to change if I'm going to be able to stay in this body, in this life, on this earth. And so that's been first and foremost my own commitment to my own healing. And in that, I've learned so much, right? That's, I would say, my foundation, like my life experience, my journey with grief and loss and separation, both through physical death, but then also all the other types of loss, right? I've been thinking more and more recently about also like the grief of our loss of relationship to land and place, right? As so many of us that navigate this world as displaced people, for me growing up in the diaspora, right? All of that, there's all this grief that is, yes, it's personal, lived, real from my own life, and also, yeah, generational, my family, and ancestral. And I've also been on this journey of, with the support of elders and mentors and people who are really skilled in this work, like getting more and more clear on like what's mine and actually what if this is like ancestral that I'm carrying. That sometimes it feels overwhelming. Also, there's a part of me, if I can kind of step back from it a little bit, that's like, wow, it's really a gift also that I am in a position in this place and time on this earth with my life circumstances where things haven't been easy. And also, I do have the ability to be somebody that says, like, this cannot continue. And so I need to, and I feel called to do the work to clear whatever this is that I literally feel like was inherited in my DNA. All of that, what's deep is that, like, one, that has shaped me, who I am, my very presence, my energy, my spirit, my understanding, my skill set, all of that has shaped me. And then also I feel like helped me be able to sit with that when people are navigating that for themselves, which is so much of what we do. Holding space for people who are grieving, holding space for people who are navigating loss, holding space when, yes, maybe a loved one is dying, and actually what's coming to the surface is layers and layers of unprocessed guilt about who knows how many other things, right? And then to be, concretely, I will say also, I've been a birth worker, a full spectrum birth worker for the last, about 10 years or so. And I have been in a deep journey of learning/unlearning in my understandings about birth and death and the relationships between the two. And what's interesting, while I still provide birth support in a lot of different ways, it was getting more and more clear to me that, like, that in and of itself wasn't my role. That there is ways that I work in that realm, but there is also something in my spirit that has gotten very clear to me that I believe my ancestors are been working really hard to show me. Some days I feel like they're kind of like, come on, like, is this like, we work at that portal, at that gateway of life and death. And what happens in birth, what happens in death, what happens in loss and transitions, it's not all that different. It's that the form changes shape, the energy might be different, the emotional, like, human experience of it might have different qualities, but it's really all, to me, like being someone who can sit at that portal and work with that energy and work with people who are navigating all that comes with it.
Gosh, that's beautiful. Thank you both for sharing such vulnerable, deep stuff that I'm sure if you haven't already moved through, you're still continuously moving through it. I know that for myself as well, and I wanted to say thank you for sharing that. I know some parts could be easy and some parts could be hard, but I think it's so beautiful that y'all are alchemizing your pain to be able to help others, to be a person that you needed during some really hard times in your life. And it's beautiful to see that, and it's also wild to also, like, incorporate that you've been doing it your whole life and you didn't even realize it. This might be off topic, but my father has this photo thing of, like, family photos that just keep popping up. And he sat back one day and he was like, you realize everyone who has died, you are the only one who has a photo with every single person who has died in the last 10 years or even more. And he was like, do you just know that they're going to pass? And I was kind of like, I don't know. Maybe I do, but I don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes time to catch up with ourselves, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty neat to like hear y'all's experiences and how you frame that of like sitting at the portal. And I was like, whoa. Like maybe more of us sit at the portal and don't even really know it.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really beautiful that y'all do that. And I was just curious, what are some ways that y'all prepare people how to cope with their grief?
What that has me think of is a couple different things. One, what we've been touching on a little bit as we've been sharing some of our own personal stories is like, first and foremost, this is work that we have been doing and need to continue to be doing for ourselves. Like for us to be able to show up in a good way in these times, that is first. That's the foundation, right? And then I think what Batul mentioned in terms of how we have been taught / are remembering how to relate to emotions or energy, how to understand the idea of, oh, this sadness that's coming up. Yes, how can I sit and how can I feel how it shows up in my body? How can I get clear on both like where it's coming from, but also like what is it showing me? What is this sadness here? So that is one of the really beautiful teachings again of our teachers. One of our mentors, Estella, who we've been mentioning, is that our emotions are here to teach us things, right? And so I know for me, I grew up literally being punished for expressing emotion, right? Not only was I taught that you're not supposed to, but literally punished. And it's been a big unlearning for me to actually allow myself to even feel and to like be comfortable with feeling and to be comfortable with expressing and to be comfortable also being witnessed in that. You know, I think even when I was younger, I would just kind of be by myself. Also, how I was taught, what I was taught about grief, like you do that quietly by yourself. No one wants to see it. No one wants to hear it. Come back when you're better, kind of thing, right? And so that has been such a deep journey for me to feel comfortable being witnessed in that vulnerability is deep. Again, being in that process, that practice for myself, first and foremost, and then holding that space that invites people in. And then also like being able to come with some of those teachings around that we share with folks around like, well, how do we relate to this energy? Because really at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's energy that wants to move. It's energy that wants to be expressed. It's energy that wants to better teach us wants to teach us how to be better humans on this planet. And so how do we be with that? And there's no right or wrong way, right? That's the other thing. There's so many misconceptions about death and grief in this culture. There's no stages. There's no timeline. There's no beginning and ending, right? We say often, we talk about this idea like grief is not to be overcome. It's integrated. It's integrated into our being. And for those of us that experience really big losses, that journey is a lifetime journey. Our relationship to it might shift and change over time, but it never goes away. It becomes part of who we are, and that's not a bad thing. Yeah, we don't want to stay stuck and unable to like be. We're also meant to be living and joyful and be in beauty and be in relationship and be present in this world. So like, that's kind of where I feel like we end up being with folks a lot, is kind of like, yes, we acknowledge, we encourage you to acknowledge and be with what you're feeling right now, no matter how big or scary it might feel. Like it's going to be okay. And how do we work with that over time? And our timelines are unique, just as unique as we are. How do we work with that over time so that we can integrate it And then what? Not with this vibe of like, oh, get over it, move on, but with this kind of like, how do we learn from the natural world, like how to be with that and transmute it and keep flourishing?
Yeah, that's incredible. I love what you said there about integrating the grief, because we were always taught like the same with you. Go to your room, fill it out, come back when you're good. Not even your room. I didn't have a room. But anyways, but yeah, go over here, deal with it, come back. But being able to like learn how to just integrate it and not beat yourself up and be like, I should be over this by now. I think that's really great to hear. I know that y'all have been doing a lot more ancestral work. Would you say that ancestral work is what changed y'all's mindset on how death plays out, on like, breaking those misconceptions of death?
Yeah, I think this path has definitely supported that. I think because this path of Curanderismo is so nature-based, it's really like driven it home that we can't have one without the other, right? We can't have life without death. I would even say like we can't truly have joy without pain. And not just having pain. And I think this is what May-lissa was speaking to, like, because, we all have pain, but like making relationship with our pain, which means facing our pain and feeling our pain. And like May-lissa said, trying to understand our pain. When did it start? When does it come up? That's like the process of what we call integration. And it's so great, Melly. You were just reminding me too, like we talk about like grief is integrated. And it's reminding me too of trauma too, because I think there's just so much Western perspective on trauma. And like it's something that we should get over. And my experience is the same with trauma as it is, with grief, that it's something that I integrate. It still comes up for me. My childhood traumas still come up for me. And I don't know if they're going to go away someday, right? But when they come up, it's actually for me to look closer, right? To look closer and to try to understand, this is a lot of our work too, is like inner child work, right? And yeah, like, when did this start? And when did I start relating to the world or myself this way? And is there anything I can do to change it or to love it more, love myself more?
I love that. That reminds me of a story one of my friends told me in an interview. They asked him what was his favorite job that like really helped him grow. And he mentioned the worst job he ever had. They treated him so horribly. And the interviewer was like, wait, why would you choose that? Mm-hmm. And he was like, because I learned the most about myself, my worth, what I am not going to ever put up with again, and how I deserve to be treated. Mm-hmm. And that got me thinking like, whoa, like where can we step back and look in all of life and a lot of different painful moments where we can find the gratitude in that moment for where we are today. And I was just like, that was super beautiful that he had shared that. So that made me think of that when you were explaining it. I love all of this, the way my brain's working. I just want to go and like journal and figure some things out on my own. But at the same moment, like me and my partner, we are lightly doing energy work and sometimes provide limpias. And when we first started, we found ourselves so drained after. And it got me thinking like, y'all are doing some beautiful work that can also be seen as heavy towards other people, or can also for people like me and my partner who are like, we don't necessarily have a mentor that's like teaching us. We're kind of intuitively, doing things as what feels good, but we find ourselves sometimes feeling drained. Do you have any tips on how to protect your energy and not have that draining feeling?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two ways that I take care of myself, I would say, in this work. And one is through what we call the self limpia, which is actually like making allotted time to conjure up our pain, basically. And the limpia is traditionally, it's an opportunity for us to cleanse and clear, but also like call our soul or our spirit back. It's a way to like come back into our body and have our true essence be here. And so, that's what the curandere does, right? Is a limpia typically. And the reason they do a limpia typically is someone comes because there's been a susto, there's been some kind of trauma. The beautiful thing is we can do the limpia for ourselves, right? And that is a big part of our practice, and is taking time to get present with our feelings. And energies accumulate, right? And especially when we're working with grief and death and all of that, it's actually part of the job to take care of ourselves. It's not like some side thing we do. Like May-lissa was saying this, like we have to. We have to take time to cry if we can. We have to take time to feel so that we can integrate and let go. So it's not just so stuffed up in us. And so there's many ways to do a self-limpia. The elements are involved. For me, my favorite way to offer myself a limpia is through a baño or a bath. For me, the particular trauma that I have, it's hard for me to really relax. There's only a couple things that really do it, or a few things, I'd say, that really do it for me. But one of them is hot water, right? It helps me relax. Another one is like deep, hard massage that helps me. So yeah, that's where I do a lot of my healing work, is in the bath, and actually like creating a ceremony there, which means like bringing in the elements, smudging the space, cleaning it physically first, then smudging the space, cleaning it energetically, bringing in the elements, like, well, the water's there, of course, and then maybe some candles. For us, we have a particular way of making a baño where we boil herbs on the stove, and then we put that water, that tea in the bath. Often we also work with fresh flowers in the bath too. So it's a whole personal ceremony that we can create for ourselves. But it's not just a bath, right? It's not just like a bubble bath or like a pleasurable bath. Like I said, it's a bath to conjure up our pain.
Yeah.
And to be held, right? And to be held by the ancestors. So that's one place and one practice that I was in the bath for 3 hours this morning.
Nice.
So I go there quite often, actually, almost every day. And then the other piece is, and you mentioned it, is protection. I'm so into protection. And there's many kinds of protection that's needed. There's the physical protection as people doing this work, right? Like we often, especially when we're going to work with clients, we'll often like wear these scarves on our head, right? And I wear it one now almost every day. But the idea is this is protection. This is psychic protection here. I wear a faja or a belt, right? I wear it under my clothes actually every day. And that was something, in 2019, after I'd been on this path for some time, I don't have this experience anymore, but even in 2019, there was still some like questioning of this path. Like, do I really want to do this? At that time, I got really clear, like, yes, I do. And so that's when I started wearing a faja every day to cover my belly button, which is like a power place. It's like a kind of an open, vulnerable place that is good to keep covered, especially in this kind of work. We wear necklaces, different jewelry, ojo de venado in our Yaqui tradition, which are all protection. So all that's wonderful, and I do it every day. Another place of protection that's really important is to have safety and community, and like know who our people are, and actually like create those communities and create that, for me, I would say like chosen family. And I also protect my energy quite a bit. Like I don't go to places where there's a lot of people unless I have to. And then I'm protected. I got all my protection, and then I'm checking in with myself. Is it time to go? Just kind of by watching and feeling the energies. And sometimes I think people kind of expose themselves to the energies more than needed. And so I try not to, as much as possible. it's not always the most popular way of being, but I actually do believe, I believe in community and I believe in learning how to be in community together. But I also believe in isolation. I also do believe in alone time and spirit time and how important that is, that we get to know ourselves and we get to know our ancestors in spirit as well.
Same question for you, May-lissa. How do you keep yourself from getting weighed down by the work that you do?
Yeah, thank you for this question. It's funny because the first thing I felt called to share is, even though I confessed in our call the other day that I am a queer who doesn't know all the astrology, I am also a Libra, cusp Scorpio sun, and a Scorpio rising. And so basically, like, my astrological chart is already kind of like, yeah, you are in the shadows, like, person. And I say that because one level, honestly, that I do want to name is that this is heavy and intense work. Also, it actually feeds me. Like, this is where I get lit up and inspired. So yes, protecting myself. Yes, clearing myself. And I'll talk about some of the other ways that I do that in a moment. I guess I just also want to name that, like, that's the thing about death and grief is, like, I feel like I tell people, oh, I'm a death worker. And they're like, whoa, that must be really hard. And I'm like, yeah, it's hard, but it's also really beautiful and inspiring. Like, what a gift to be welcomed in such an intimate way into people's lives. Like, what a gift to be trusted at some of people's most vulnerable moments. Like, what a gift to witness somebody on their healing journey. It's not to minimize the very real need for the other things we're talking about. I just know that for me, this is also what brings me to life because I love this work. And I'm not much of a small talk person. I'm like, tell me the deepest, darkest truth, depths of your soul, like, person, kind of. So, you know, I maybe have less friends, but whatever. It's fine. No, it's kidding. Anyway, so that's one piece of it and yes, +1 to everything Batul said. What I would add to that is also, for me, spending time out in nature was a big one. And sometimes I forget how necessary that is to be. And I'm so grateful that I have access to going up to the redwoods here in the Bay. I'm so grateful that the ocean is an hour drive away, right? There's beautiful rivers just like 2 hours north, right? So going out and spending the day. And a lot of times that is actually alone time for me. Like, I don't organize big group hikes. I'm like, no, I got to go out and be in nature by myself. And I got to go swim in the river, swim in that ice cold water, and lay in the sun on that rock all day by myself. Because that's how I feel like what I'm learning more and more subtly about now is protecting my energy, yes. Also, though, being able to discern what's mine and what's not mine. And for me, as somebody that gets very easily overstimulated, living in a city also, like, all these things, I know when I need to take care of myself in that way because I have a hard time discerning what's not mine. And so that's something that I'm really in this practice of right now, because I want to be able to clear out what's not mine. And I also want to be able to nourish and nurture what is mine. But I've got to be able to discern the difference a little bit first. And so then the other piece that I would add is, like, yeah, also there's things that fill me up. And I remember I was working with a coach once who said, she was, you know, also like a medium, some might call a psychic, but she could read energy. She'd be like, your energy right now is like a sponge that is just like that sponge in the kitchen sink that, like, no one's wrung it out for a while and it's just heavy weight. And I was like, dang. Okay. But she's like, you gotta, like, wring that out, right? Which is like some of what we're talking about, these clearing practices, the limpia, like this stuff, that's the practice, is like clear that out. What I loved, though, even though that was very humbling, like, whoo, image was that what she said to me was, and the thing with empaths is we talk a lot about how we absorb energy. And she said, what if we were in the practice of clearing that out and then filling ourselves up with what we want to call in? Right? And so she talked about that in relationship to like going out to the trees. Like, not only are they helping us clear just by being in their presence and by walking on the earth, but we can also be there with an intention to be like, fill myself up with this energy, fill myself up with this vibrancy, with this life. So that's also been part of my practice. Is like, how do I clear? And then also, how do I fill myself up? How do I get clear on what's mine? How do I nourish and nurture that and like fill myself up so that when I go out to do this work, I'm like, I'm good. I'm solid. I'm clear. I'm full of like this energy that I want to call in. And for me, there's also like other creative practices that do that. Music is a big one. Singing. My prayer these days, I sing. I sing for sometimes an hour, because until I feel like whatever is there is like transmuted. Singing, playing the drum. Yeah. So some of those creative practices also. And, you know, I do believe in the importance of joy in our lives. And so those are both healing, clearing practices, and they're also joyful. Like, I feel my spirit like light up. And that's what I want more of, right? Like, what are those practices that have me light up inside?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you both for sharing those. Those are really incredible. And I'm like, I've been taking notes throughout this thing here. I'm like, yeah, I need to do that, because just thinking about being in with the trees, sometimes I'll just stand there and hug it until I feel lighter. And sometimes I'll just like float in the water until like I feel like there's zero gravity on me. And so it's beautiful how powerful nature can be. And I tend to be very much forgetful of like how medicinal nature can be.
That's right. Yeah.
So thank you for your reminders, and thank you for being here. But before I get to my overall thank yous, there's this one last question that we always ask all of our guests. And y'all can rock, paper, scissors to who's going to answer first. If you could describe radical acceptance in one word, phrase, or mantra, what would it be?
I'm going to need a moment with that one. Oh, okay.
Because I've been thinking about this. It's healing. Like, that's what healing is to me. Like, that's kind of where I've come to, like, with all of this, is like that it's actually accepting myself completely as I am with all my everything, right? That radical acceptance is what healing is.
Yes.
Good one.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Thinking about this.
Yeah.
That's what health is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, it's funny because actually, as soon as I said you go first, mine popped into my head, which for me, it's compassion. And it's very similar, though, why that word came to me, because compassion is like holding that tenderness for myself and for others, for like wherever we're at in our journeys. So maybe it's tender compassion. Right?
I like that.
It's like, yeah, just like holding whatever it is with care and tenderness.
Yeah, because I think that it's so easy to, at least for me and people in my circle, it's so easy for us to give that tenderness and that kindness and that patience and that acceptance to each other. But then when it comes to like reflecting it back on ourselves, sometimes we're like so hard on ourselves, and we got to treat ourselves the way we treat our people.
That's it.
Thank y'all for being here. I'm so happy that we were able to do this. And I feel so blessed to be able to have y'all here.
I feel blessed to be here. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm just really grateful to have you as our interviewer. And I know for me, I get really nervous around these kind of things. And yeah, something about your presence and you also being QT BIPOC and Yaqui and everything is also just, yeah, I think it's very supportive of how I felt today. So thank you.
Yay. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also echoing the gratitude. Thank you for your tenderness and your thoughtfulness and like the integrity that I feel you navigating this process with. Because, yeah, it can go and feel a whole lot of ways. So I appreciate you did a really nice job of holding this space and inviting us in. It felt good. Feels good. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's true, huh? I've started saying that so I can receive love better.
Yes, take it in. Take it in.
Oh, yay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. And makes me really happy and it helps me jump out of my imposter syndrome. So I appreciate that so much. Tap that follow button, give us a 5-star rating and review, and hey, your review might end up on the show. This podcast is organically grown by Rafaela Landestoy, Leah Jackson, and myself, V. Vasquez. Editor and sound designer, Leah Jackson of Puka Puka Creative. Original music, produced by Basque. His music is amazing. And emotional support by our fur babies, Nugget and Pukalani.